I'm going to talk really quickly about what the success and a little bit about what the failings were of Loaded, and also really answering that question of how the hell we managed to launch a magazine that really didn't fit in the publishing company that it came out of. In the early 90s, British men mainly read specialist magazines. They read music magazines, motorbike magazines. There were one or two small upmarket fashion magazines like GQ and For Him. And the general consensus within the media was that men would never buy en masse, as women did with the likes of Cosmopolitan and Marie Claire and so on. And I was being interviewed for a job of the editorship of the New Musical Express, where I'd pretty much learnt my career, learnt my trade. And as we got down to the last two, they said to me, if you didn't do this magazine, would you like to do your own magazine? I kind of leapt on that opportunity, probably a little too enthusiastically, because in the year between when I'd left the NME and they'd called me back to see if I'd possibly edit it, I'd been reading a magazine called Arena. And Arena was a very well-written magazine about men's lifestyle, but it wasn't really the lifestyle of any men that I knew. And I was kind of reading it because occasionally they'd have an interview with somebody like Mike Tyson, or they'd have very funny little columns, but it was kind of it was a bit like when I'd first read the NME. I read about 25% of it, and the rest of it made me angry. And whilst they said, would you like your own magazine, I thought, yeah, Arena, edited by Hunter Thompson, who was my favourite journalist at the time. And I was probably too enthusiastic because they gave the NME job to someone else, and they locked me in a room to create this magazine I described to them. So coming up with the product was one thing. Many of the guys I hired to work on the magazine had never worked in publishing. Actually, many of them haven't worked since either. And there wasn't much work done at the time, so it's a wonder how it got done. So in terms of creating the team, I knew that, for me, it was something that Steve said quite near the end of his talk there. For me, magazines are all about people. They're about the people who make them, the people who read them, and the people who advertise in them. And the role of the editor is to get all those people together in one place without there being any barriers. So I've been very successful at NME in bringing on a whole new era of writers. So I didn't have any problems about getting the talent. The big challenge was, as Felix Dennis says in his book, how to get this very boring, staid publishing company, which was known as the Ministry of Magazines, to launch this thing. And then thankfully, above me, there was my former editor on the NME, Alan Lewis, and he wasn't so much a boss as a handler. And I kind of liked that, because I thought, spies have handlers. And then my girlfriend said, James, dogs have handlers. And just before we did some research. We went out and showed the magazines in these little rooms where you kind of look through glass and one-way mirrors, and you see people talking about your magazine. I was just trying to work out then when I was sitting down whether it was 3 months or 9 months. So it's one of those, but some sort of settled with 6. Loaded, the publisher of Loaded, Andy McDuff, had a certificate on his wall given to him by the other publishers saying, the award for launching the magazine most likely to lose you your job. So even within the company, confidence was high. And yet we had a business plan that said we should break even after 3 years. And I think we broke even after 9 months, or 3 months, whichever. It was a hazy time, there was a lot of champagne. And that made it the fastest. We made our first pound of profit after 9 months. And that made it the fastest ever business payback that IPC had ever had. And it might be one of the fastest ever in publishing. And what we really had was we just had total and utter belief that we were right. And Tim and I, who started it, really just felt that we were either going to sell 100,000 copies or 10,000. We never thought we'd sell 500,000, and that 10 years later it had sold 50 million copies, and that it would create a market that now just exists en masse throughout the world, much as the women's market had existed since Cosmo had launched in the early 70s. And to come back to that thing about the people that create it, I was just very, very lucky that the guys who rolled up at my doorstep were pretty much, as I was joking, but they were unemployable, and they were people who didn't fit in anywhere else. And I'd seen a business talk that Tom Peters, the American business guru, gave on BBC Two, and he was walking around this room, and there were like 3,000 people there in white ties and white shirts and blue ties, or blue shirts and yellow ties. And he said, guys, look at yourselves, you're middle management or super management or whatever he was using the phrase. He said, you all look the same. The most important thing in your business is you have to have some weirdos. Because weirdos might not fit in, they might not play golf, they might be a bit unpalatable in the canteen, but weirdos are the people that will change your business for the better. The ones that think differently, that ask awkward questions. And he said, so you need 99 straight guys and one weirdo. I just turned it on its head. I had 99 weirdos and one straight guy to make sure the magazine came out. I think the best thing that I had was luck. And for me, the definition of luck is when ambition meets opportunity. And it was just the right time. It was the magazine was the culmination of everything that had gone on in my life over the previous 10 years from when I was about 18. And I was very, very aware that the lifestyle that I led, which was pretty normal, even though I'd had a great job on the NME, it was pretty much going out, getting drunk on Friday, spending all my wages, not having a great deal of money to spend on anything but drink, going to football. It was a pretty normal, it just seemed like me and my mates were never catered for. If you read GQ, you got the impression that young British men wore knee-high green Wellingtons, carried shotguns, and drove around in Range Rovers shooting grouse and stuff. It was surreal. And we kind of just felt that there was an audience there, and it turned out it was. So it was all about timing and the talent that I put together and the instinct, and also including the audience. I was infuriated as a young journalist, and in fact I just saw it today on a piece I had in the Sunday Times yesterday, where they would give information and they wouldn't say London. They would just assume the newspapers or the music magazines would always say this gig was at Dingwalls. It wouldn't, or yesterday this thing was at Michael John, Mayfair. He never said London. The assumption was outside of the M25 didn't matter. And that used to drive me mad. And for me, the magazine was about people throughout the country. It wasn't about just a few little people hanging around in Hoxton or the West End, which is what The Face and all those other magazines are about. It was about being inclusive, not exclusive. They're the things that I think we did right. I don't think I ever did anything wrong. Although I had quite a lot of explaining to do at home, often. But where I think the business went wrong is, and the reason that there's a book over there by Felix Denix, who owns Maxim, called How to Get Rich, and there's not a book by the chief executive of IBC called How to Get Rich, is that the company had no vision. They thought, they couldn't believe it, they were just putting the money in the big pockets. And they didn't realise that pretty much young men are the same throughout the world. As William said, in actual fact, what his audience aren't, my audience were. They all thought they were kung fu experts, and they all loved Chinese food. And it didn't matter whether you were to me, it didn't matter if you were in Germany, Australia, South Africa, South America, North America, Russia. And it used to really, really infuriate us that the company didn't recognise that we'd created something that could be rolled out around the world. That was my main. I think that was the only thing they did wrong. Having a dedicated publisher might have helped as well. So that's it really. It was great fun. I think the readers sensed it was great fun. The readers were involved in the magazine. They felt like it was their own. It felt like they had a club that they were suddenly a part of. And that was it really. 3 years of getting drunk and getting paid for it. So thank you.